Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Iida, coming to you from Japan's Ministry of Defense here in Tokyo as part of our Talks on Tour special. Japan's recent white papers stated that the country is facing the most severe and complex environment since World War II, with China the biggest strategic challenge. Will Donald Trump be able to thwart Xi Jinping's plans to ready his military for a possible invasion of Taiwan by 2027, a year that falls under Trump's presidency? Will the first island chain connecting Japan, Taiwan and the Philippines be ready for any eventuality? We spoke to Iida Masafumi and Jeffrey Ordaniel to find out. Take a look. Iida Masafumi, National Defense Research Institute of Japan Security Studies Department Director. A very warm welcome to Taiwan Talks today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are one of the contributors to the Japan Defense White Paper, and that was in 2024. Now, the message from that white paper was this: the international community has entered a new era of crisis. It's now facing its greatest trial since the end of World War II. The existing order is being seriously challenged, and Japan finds itself in the most severe and complex security environment of that post-war era. How would you characterize the security situation for Japan right now, given everything that has occurred since March?
I expect that the security situation around Japan will become worse and worse, because Russia continued to invade the Ukraine, and also China continues to enhance their military activities around Japan, and also North Korea continue to develop the nuclear weapons and also the missiles, including the ICBMs. I have to say that Japan will face much worse situations in the coming years.
And why is that the case? Why are we seeing this acceleration of security challenges in this region? Where is all this headed?
The so-called revisionist powers, including China, Russia, and North Korea in this region, actually is enhancing their national power. For example, China has the strong intention to challenge the existing international order, and also they have very strong power to achieve it. So that's why I think many of the regional countries, which has the benefit in maintaining the existing international order, should be very worried about the challenge from the revisionist powers.
So what would you say was the trigger, or what was the series of triggers for China as well as the other revisionist powers? Is it simply because of China's growing power?
Declining of the U.S. power is another reason. The power gap between China and the United States is shrinking. So this makes China much more aggressive, which makes China be able to behave aggressively compared to for example, 10 years before.
Just in terms of Japan, on August 26th, there was a violation of Japanese sovereign airspace for the first time since World War II. Obviously, this is an incredibly serious incursion. And yet, on November 19th, the Chinese came out and said that this was due to a technical problem, airflows and turbulence. So how do you read their coming out with this explanation? Is it to do with trying to have an outreach to Japan as Beijing braces for Trump's presidency?
First of all, I don't believe the Chinese explanation why the Chinese aircraft included the Japanese airspace. I think that at least that aircraft and also the Eastern Theater Command has a clear intention to test the Japanese response when the Chinese aircraft invaded the Japanese airspace. So that's why I think that was the very intentional intrusion toward the Japanese airspace. But why now the China explained that it was a mistake?
Yeah.
So I think
2 months after.
Yeah, I think now China would like to improve their relations with Japan, and so probably because they are facing with the growing pressure from United States, and also the elections of Trump. And so, China has to, China is trying to a little bit improve their relation with the regional countries to focus on their efforts to counter the increasing the pressure from the United States and Trump.
So how should Japan approach this then? A China that now wants to soften its approach, now has strategic reasons not to be so aggressive towards Japan. How should Japan handle that?
Yeah, the recent Chinese soft approach towards Japan is not the strategic move; it's a tactical move. So that's why I think that we should, regard the China as the unprecedented and the greatest challenge to our security. And so this is the basic understanding of our understanding about China. But if the China reduce their aggressiveness toward us, we should accept it. We should welcome it.
And is there any way to exploit that, to maximize Japan's position vis-a-vis China?
If the China continue to take the softer stance toward Japan, probably we can take advantage of that Chinese approach, soft approach. But I don't believe that the China can continue with that soft approach toward Japan. The next year is the 80th anniversary of the end of the World War II, and so probably the a kind of the nationalism will grow in the Chinese societies. And so I cannot be optimistic about that.
Turning to the 2024 white paper back again, it mentioned as a priority the early acquisition of standoff missiles such as Tomahawk, the US Tomahawk missiles. And this was big news when it was announced at the same time as the three security documents released in 2022. And China, of course, accused Japan of violating its own pacifist constitution. How dangerous is that kind of rhetoric for Japan?
Yeah, first of all, I should say that the China does not have any right to interpret the Japanese constitutions. So this is our right. This is the first one. But at the same time, it's very clear that the China is trying to broaden the divide among the Japanese societies about how to understand the Japanese constitution or how to protect our national security. But mainly because of the Chinese very aggressive actions around Senkaku Islands, I think that more and more Japanese people understand the reality of the threat posed by China toward the Japanese defense, Japanese national interest. So this is the very important driving force for the Japanese government to acquire the counter attack capabilities. Probably the 10 years before, I couldn't imagine that many of the Japanese people accept this acquirement of the counter-strike capabilities. But now, more than half of the Japanese people accept it and support it. So this is a huge change. And this change was made by China.
2027 was the year that Xi Jinping, commanded the PLA to be ready for a possible Taiwan invasion. How ready is your assessment of Japan for that date?
Actually, it is not clear whether or not truly the Xi Jinping, the order the PLA to acquire the sufficient capabilities to militarily conquer Taiwan. But it's very clear that the Xi Jinping and the PLA is making every effort to enhance their military capabilities to deal with the Taiwan problem. And on our side, we clearly understand the Chinese intention and their efforts to enhance their military capabilities. And that's why Japan and the United States has been accelerating our efforts to enhance our combined operations capabilities to deal with the possible contingencies in this region.
And what's your view about Donald Trump as a factor in China's calculation, Xi Jinping's calculus?
I think so. I think so. But the directions of the impact of the Donald Trump on the calculations on the Chinese calculation is not clear for me. Yeah, probably some people can say that the uncertainty by the Donald Trump will make the Chinese calculations much more difficult, and that will to some extent deter the Chinese aggressive actions in this region. But on the other side, the other people probably would say that the decrease of the U.S. credibility in this region will pave the way for the Chinese leadership to take the military actions in this region. So I think the both are possible. I'm not quite sure which is much the probable, but we have to prepare for the two possible implications, impacts caused by the President Trump.
Yeah, and then for a final question, we've heard recently that Miao Hua, who is a top military official, he's actually a political leader within the CMC, Central Military Commission for China, has been stepped down by Beijing. And also there are rumors that Dong Jun, the defense minister, is under investigation for corruption. Do you see these as evidence that the PLA is not ready, is not in any shape to carry out a Taiwan invasion, or do you see this as Xi Jinping readying them to do such a thing?
Yeah, from my point of view, this incident, they prove that the Xi Jinping's very strong leadership in the among the PLA. The Xi Jinping, only Xi Jinping can punish the very high-ranking military officers, and he punished the three people in the Chinese military commissions. So that means nobody can stop the Xi Jinping about the issues inside the PLA. I don't know that this very strong Xi Jinping's leadership over the PLA will make the PLAs more aggressive in their actions or not. I'm not quite sure. It totally depends on the mind of the Xi Jinping.
Okay, so more a sign of his absolute control than of the shapeliness of the PLA. Iida Masafumi, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And now we're joined by our second guest, Jeffrey Ordaniel, to discuss the strength of the First Island Chain, a US line of defense connecting Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Jeffrey is the Pacific Forum Director for Maritime Security based here in Tokyo. Jeffrey, a very warm welcome to Taiwan Talks today.
Thanks for having me.
So the US plan to deploy military bases and missile units in Japan and the Philippines. Now, Russia and China have criticized that plan, and they say that the US and Japan are using Taiwan as a pretext. Now, that's because the US plan is in the event of a Taiwan contingency. What do you make of these developments?
I think those statements from the Chinese and the Russians are an attempt to gaslight the region about the sources of instability in our part of the world. I think if you look at the Chinese military buildup just over the past couple of years, these are really the sources, the real sources of threats in our region, because just take a look at the PLA Navy, which is now the largest in the world. The Coast Guard of China is now the largest in the world in terms of surface assets. If you look at their nuclear arsenal buildup, there are estimates that in 15 years, China would achieve nuclear parity with the United States.
China would say that it is simply trying to catch up, I suppose, to the US and Russia.
Yeah, there's no problem in terms of building your capabilities, but the problem is when these capabilities are matched with corresponding coercive maneuvers at sea or elsewhere in other domains. Problem is, if you look at the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, all of these tensions are driven by increased Chinese capabilities. And so the region is essentially just trying to ensure that China is not able to dominate the affairs of the region, and they see the United States as an important element in their effort to deter China.
Well, where do we expect the bases to be in the Philippines? In the Japanese ones on the Nansei Islands, in Okinawa, Kagoshima prefectures. But how about the Philippines?
I'm not privy to the discussions, but I expect that the missile deployments will be in northern Luzon. I would think Cagayan province and Isabela facing Taiwan would make a lot of sense. But I think the Philippine priority is to ensure that these missile systems are able to actually uh, impact its policy towards the South China Sea. So I would assume the Philippines would insist a deployment on Palawan, for example, or Subic facing the South China Sea. So these are under discussions, and I think these discussions will not necessarily be public. So we wouldn't know where exactly these missiles would be based. But
Yeah,
but I
because
think
previously Marcus, of course, has mentioned that the bases in the Philippines wouldn't be used in a Taiwan crisis, but he did put a condition on that, which is unless it was in our interests.
that's right. And I think Marcos made it clear that Taiwan is in the Philippine national interest by virtue of geography, and also by the fact that uh, there are over 100,000 Filipinos living and working in Taiwan. So any attack on Taiwan would be a security threat to the Philippines.
On the president, so the feud between him and his vice president, Sara Duterte, has just escalated. It now includes death threats. From a national security, regional security viewpoint, how do you consider its significance?
I think it's significant because the vice president in the Philippines obviously is next in line. And there seems to be a policy disagreement between President Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte on their China policies.
From the perspective of regional security, how significant is this? You mentioned, differences in China policy.
If the if Sara Duterte survives this political crisis at home, I think she would be a strong contender for the 2028 presidential election. And so that could mean that Philippine policy could shift back to Duterte era China approach.
So
And
are you saying that you believe she has the same approach to China as her father?
not necessarily, but I would argue that she is in favor more of accommodating Chinese policy preferences, not necessarily in the same manner as how her father did it, but I think she has that preference for engaging China more.
Right. And China's interest in this feud, how would you characterize that?
It's difficult to assess, but I think it's very obvious that China prefers a political leader in Manila who is more accommodating of its security and policy preferences, and so they're watching very closely. And as you have said, this has resulted to death threats. And so, if the president dies, Duterte becomes president. And so that's a development that is clearly being watched not just by China, I think, but by also by the United States, because the United States, all of these cooperation agreements with the United States, all of these things that are happening with the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, increased U.S. presence, all of these can easily be rolled back by whoever is the next president.
Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, on a visit to Palawan in the Philippines, revealed the existence of a task force called the Ayungin Task Force, named after, of course, the Philippine name for Second Thomas Shoal. Should we be in any way surprised about the existence of this task force?
The task force is involved in terms of providing reconnaissance or intelligence information so that the Philippine resupply mission is done in a way that that is efficient because they have a full operating picture. The United States has the technology, and so the Philippines doesn't. There's an offer. Remember, there's an offer from the United States to escort Philippine resupply mission. The Philippines is refusing that because they want to maintain their strategic autonomy, their agency in conducting these operations.
Do you think this could be an explanation for the, let's call it, more peaceful movements around Second Thomas Shoal? For instance, could the task force have, factored into China's calculus in terms of that agreement that was brokered between the two sides?
I think so. But I think the biggest determinant really is the fact that there is now a greater expression of support on the part of the Philippines that it's ready and able to provide the Philippines whatever it needs to be able to maintain the status quo and withstand Chinese coercion in the South China Sea.
So essentially, Lloyd Austin revealing that was also a deterrence effort.
I would guess so, because there's that mutual desire to increase the deterrent value of the alliance. Remember, for a very long time, the alliance, the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, has not really been has not contributed to the deterrence in the South China Sea. But since 2019, when it was clarified that the treaty applies to the South China Sea, all of these developments, including the task force Ayungin, have rolled out. So.
Of course, there will be a new US administration under Donald Trump, and Marcus had a phone call with Donald Trump, and he expressed to him he's very keen to strengthen that US alliance, which he said is as deep as it could possibly be. In your view, do you think that Trump could strengthen it further than Biden? And then in terms of the results, is there any way that Trump could force or corral China into stepping back its assertive actions in the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea?
If you look at the appointment of Senator Marco Rubio and Representative Mike Waltz as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, respectively, they point to a stronger support for alliances in the region. Marco Rubio is a very strong supporter of the U.S.-Philippine alliance in the U.S. Senate for a very long time. And also, if you recall, it was under the Trump administration that U.S. policy in the South China Sea really shifted in favor of the Philippines, right? So number one, in 2019, once and for all, the United States clarified that Articles 4 and 5 of the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty applied to the South China Sea, something that the Obama administration has repeatedly refused to do. And second, it was also under the Trump administration in 2020, July 2020, when the United States clarified that it has a position on maritime disputes in the South China Sea, and that position is mirroring the 2016 arbitral award. In the past, the U.S. policy has been not taking sides on maritime disputes. These are massive changes in American policy that were done during the Trump administration, something that I didn't see under the Biden administration. So I think that there will be a lot of...
The Biden administration also clarified that the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to the South China Sea and that they would do everything they could to assist the Philippines.
That's right. They also clarified that. But that's just mirroring, essentially copy-pasting the Trump policy.
So you mean they didn't go further and beyond that?
I don't think... I think they added one word, a few words, which is including Coast Guard vessels.
And yet, when Duterte, threatened to pull out of the EDCA agreement with the US, Donald Trump himself personally said he didn't mind. It would save the US a lot of money.
That's right. Yeah. But remember, I think President Duterte, I would argue, is an outlier in Philippine politics. I don't even subscribe to the idea that Sara Duterte holds the same grudge or the same animosity, personal, deep-seated animosity towards the United States. I don't think that's going to happen under President Marcos or whoever is going to succeed President Marcos.
So you mentioned that Biden didn't go beyond what the Trump administration did first time round. Can the Trump administration strengthen the alliance, and how so? In what ways do you think?
I think we will see massive investments in enhanced defense cooperation agreement sites because remember when Donald Trump was in Manila in 2017, he described the Philippine value to America in terms of geography, right? He called the Philippines, I think at that time, if I'm not mistaken, a prime piece of real estate from a military standpoint. I think there will be a lot of focus on geography, on the geographic value of the Philippines in terms of coping with the potential contingencies in Asia. Central to that, of course, is Taiwan, which is, Philippine cooperation in the defense of Taiwan, I think, is critical. The Philippines is right next to Taiwan geographically, very close to Taiwan. So
there are some agreements between Japan and the Philippines, and there's a reciprocal access agreement. How close is their security relationship?
I think it's very close. There's also, in my view, an effort on the part of the United States to link all these bilateral alliances to increase deterrence. So you have in April this year, there was the first ever trilateral leader summit in Washington, D.C. President Biden, President Marcos, and Prime Minister Kishida were in Washington. I think that's a testament to how the United States wants these alliances to be linked together. Maybe not an Asian NATO, but just increased coordination and collaboration, making sure that they're able to address the evolving challenges posed by China.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much, Jeffrey Ordaniel, for joining Taiwan Talks today.
Thank you so much.